In 1985, in a small house off Zarzamora Street in San Antonio, Mami Carmen kept a wooden spoon hanging from a nail by the stove. She used it for two things: stirring beans and reminding her 4 kids who ran the house. Number 14 grounded a girl from her own cousin's quinceañera for 3 months. Number 11 had a 5-year-old walking to the corner store with $1 tied into a handkerchief. Number 3 stopped a 16-year-old from leaving the house after her novio pulled up in a clean lowrider. This is a look back at how Mexican parents raised their kids in the 1980s. Some of these rules would not fly today. None of this is parenting advice. It is a record of a specific time and a specific culture. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 20 Mexican parenting rules from the 1980s that are illegal now. Number 20. La chancla. Every Mexican kid knows the sound. It is the soft slap of a rubber sandal being lifted off a tile floor. And it is the last warning you ever needed. La chancla was not a punishment. It was a delivery system for a message your mommy had already given you 3 times. By the 4th time, the sandal was airborne. Mothers across South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley developed a kind of muscle memory with that sandal. They could be standing at the stove, stirring a pot of frijoles, and launch a chancla down the hallway without missing a beat. The aim was legendary. Today, a flying sandal would land a parent on a Child Protective Services report. Back then, it was just Tuesday afternoon. Mami Carmen in San Antonio had 3 pairs of chanclas, and her kids could tell which one was about to fly by the sound of the rubber peeling off the floor. La chancla was the soundtrack of a generation, and you can still see grown men flinch when an older Mexican woman bends down to fix her shoe. Number 19. El cinto. If la chancla was the warning shot, el cinto was the heavy artillery. And most Mexican homes in the 1980s kept it hanging in plain sight. The leather belt lived on a hook by the bedroom door, or draped over a chair, or coiled on top of the dresser. It was always visible. That was the whole point. You walked past it 20 times a day. And it reminded you to behave before you even thought about misbehaving. Don Refugio, a father of 5 in Edinburgh, Texas, kept his cinto on a nail above the kitchen table. His kids ate dinner with that belt looking down at them every night. None of them ever got hit with it. The belt did its job by simply existing. Today, that level of visible threat would be called intimidation. In the 1980s, it was called raising kids who said please and thank you. Most Mexican fathers never had to take it down. The threat was the entire point, and the threat worked because everyone in the house understood the rules. Number 18. La cuchara de palo. The wooden spoon in a Mexican kitchen had 2 jobs, and you never knew which was about to happen. It stirred beans for hours on a low flame, into the kind of pot of frijoles that fed a family of 7 for 3 days. It also corrected attitudes. The same spoon, the same hand. Donna Esperanza in East LA had a wooden spoon she had owned since 1971. By 1985, the handle was darker on one end from years of bean broth, and the other end was smooth from being gripped during moments of correction. Her kids could pick that spoon out of a drawer of 15 utensils. They knew that when the bean pot was simmering and they started fighting in the living room, Mommy would walk in with that spoon still warm, and the conversation would change immediately. Today, hitting a child with any kitchen object is a hard line. In the 1980s, the same thing that fed you also corrected you. And somehow the family that ate from that pot still showed up to abuela's house every Sunday for menudo. Number 17. Te voy a dar con la chancla. Before any chancla actually flew, there was the verbal warning. And every Mexican kid in the 1980s could time it down to the second. Mommy would say it once, low and calm, almost under her breath. The first time was a courtesy. The second time, the volume came up half a notch. The third time, the chancla was already in her hand, and you had about 4 seconds to apologize or run. The verbal warning was a contract. Mexican mothers used the same exact 6 words across the entire Southwest, from San Antonio to Boyle Heights. The contract was simple. You stop the behavior. The chancla goes back on her foot. You ignore the warning. The chancla becomes a projectile. Today, this would be classified as a verbal threat in most parenting handbooks. Back then, it was the most patient warning system a Mexican mother could offer, and most kids were grateful for it. It gave them a way out. Number 16. Public shaming at the corner store. Corner store shaming as community discipline. If you got caught doing something wrong outside the house, your mommy did not wait until you got home. She handled it right there on the sidewalk, in front of God, in front of Dona Lupe, and in front of the man selling raspas from the cart. Mira, mocoso, did I raise you to take what is not yours? The whole block heard it. Other kids stopped what they were doing and watched. The store owner came outside to nod along. Dona Lupe in Boyle Heights once watched a neighbor mother chew out her own 10-year-old in front of the carniceria for stealing a Boobaloo gum, and Dona Lupe added her own 2 cents from the doorway. The kid never stole again. Today, public shaming a child is considered emotional abuse and would get a parent reported. In the 1980s, it was the social contract that kept entire neighborhoods running. The barrio raised the kid, and the barrio also corrected the kid, and nobody filed paperwork about it. Number 15. Espérate a que tu papá llegue. Wait until your father gets home. These were the 7 words that ruined an entire afternoon for a Mexican kid in 1985. Mommy would catch you doing something stupid around 2 in the afternoon, and instead of dealing with it right then, she would deliver this sentence and walk away. Now you had 4 hours of waiting. 4 hours of looking at the clock. 4 hours of trying to figure out if there was any chance she might forget by the time Papa came through the door from the construction site or the body shop. She never forgot. The moment Papa walked in, took off his boots and sat down for his cafecito, Mommy would lean over and whisper the whole story in his ear. Papa would put his cup down. He would look at you, and the afternoon of dread would arrive in one slow nod from the head of the table. Today, letting a child stew in fear for 4 hours would be called psychological cruelty. In the 1980s, it was the patience of a Mexican mother who knew her husband was the closer. Number 14. The 3-month grounding. When a Mexican daughter messed up in 1985, the punishment was not a weekend off her phone. There were no phones. The punishment was 3 months grounded from every quinceañera, every baile, every birthday party, every backyard carne asada within the entire extended family. The sentence was final, and no one negotiated. There was a girl in San Antonio in 1986 named Lupita, who got caught skipping school with her primas to go to the mall. Her mommy grounded her from quinceañeras for an entire summer, including her own cousins. Lupita watched the photos come back from that quince in a thick paper envelope, and she sat at the kitchen table, flipping through them while her cousin's voice played on the phone in the other room. That summer felt like a year. Today, a 3-month grounding from social events would be developmentally harmful. In the 1980s, it was just the price you paid for skipping school once. Mexican mothers did not believe in lessons that lasted a week. They believed in lessons that lasted a season, and a season is what they gave you. Number 13. Sending the kids for beer. The carne asada was already going. Tío Beto was working the grill in the backyard with a cold tecate in his hand, and the cooler was running low. Without looking up, he would call out to whichever kid was closest. Mijo, tráeme una cerveza. The kid was usually 6. The cooler was usually 10 feet away. The kid would walk over, dig his arm down into the icy water, pull out a sweating can of tecate or carta blanca, and walk it back, The first time it happened, the kid felt like he had been promoted to adult. Today, asking a child to handle alcohol in any way is illegal in most states, and the carne asada itself would be fielding questions from a social worker by sundown. In the 1980s, it was a small act of trust. The boy carried that beer back across the patio like he was carrying a chalice. The grown man would crack the can, take a sip, and nod at him. And that nod was worth more than money. It was the nod of belonging. Number 12. Front seat of the Buick. Adage 7. Mami Carmen drove a 1979 Buick Regal in 1985, and her 7-year-old son sat in the front passenger seat every time they went anywhere. No booster seat, no seat belt, just a kid sitting on a white vinyl bench, looking out the windshield like a co-pilot. The bench seat in those Buicks was the size of a small couch. When Mommy had to brake hard at a red light on Commerce Street, she would throw her right arm across the kid's chest in what every Mexican mother in America called the seatbelt of love. That arm saved 1,000 kids. Today, putting a 7-year-old in the front seat without a booster is a citation in every state. And rightly so. In the 1980s, it was just how you got to the laundromat. The front seat was a privilege, and the kid who got it felt important. The cassette tape played Los Bukis, or Vicente Fernandez, and the kid sang along to half the words while watching the road like a man. Number 11. The 5-year-old at La Tiendita. A dollar bill, folded into the corner of a clean handkerchief, knotted twice. That was how a Mexican mother sent her 5-year-old to the corner store in 1985. The kid would walk 8 blocks alone, cross 2 streets, push open the glass door of La Tiendita, hand the dollar to Don Memo behind the counter, and ask for milk and a paleta as a reward. Don Memo knew every kid on the block by name. He would slip an extra babalu into the bag for free, and the kid would walk back home holding the change in his fist like it was a gold coin. Today, sending a 5-year-old anywhere alone is grounds for a Child Protective Services visit. In the 1980s, it was a rite of passage. The whole barrio was watching from porches and front yards, and that quiet supervision was the safety net no one ever talked about. Tia Rosa across the street was watching. The viejito on the corner was watching. The lady hanging laundry 2 houses down was watching. The kid never knew. The barrio knew. Number 10. The bed of the pickup. A 1982 Ford F-150 with 5 primos sitting in the bed of the truck, knees pulled up, hair blowing sideways, watching the freeway exit signs roll by. This was how Mexican families got to the swap meet in San Bernardino on a Saturday morning. The cousins held on to the side rails. The wind was loud. Tio's voice was barely audible from the cab. Nobody had a seat belt because nobody had a seat. Today, this is illegal in most states. And rightly so. The danger was real. Kids did fall out. The laws that came in the 1990s were a response to actual laws. But in the 1980s, the bed of the pickup was the closest thing a working-class Mexican family had to a convertible. The wind in your face on the way to the swap meet, the laughter of your primos, the box of menudo waiting for you when you got home. The parents knew it was dangerous, and they did it anyway because there was no other way to fit 11 people into one vehicle. The bed of the truck was not negligence, it was math. Number 9. Levantate at 6 in the morning. The voice came through the bedroom door at 6 sharp every Saturday. Levantate. Mami Carmen did not knock. She did not negotiate. She opened the door, flicked on the overhead light, and the kids had about 90 seconds to get their feet on the floor before the second warning came. Saturday morning in a Mexican household in 1985 was not for sleeping in. It was for chores. The lawn had to be mowed. The driveway had to be hosed down. The trash cans had to be brought back from the curb. The dishes from Friday night had to be washed by hand. By the time most of the gringo kids on the block were just getting up to watch cartoons, the Mexican kids were already on their second task and sweating. Today, this kind of structured early labor for kids would land in a parenting article about childhood burnout. In the 1980s, it was how you learned that life owed you nothing. Mexican parents in the 1980s were not raising children. They were raising adults who happened to be small. Number 8. Cleaning the sala on Saturday morning. Before any kid in a Mexican household got to ask about the swap meat or tío's carne asada, the sala had to be cleaned. The entire living room, furniture moved, plastic couch covers wiped down with a damp rag, the brass sombrero on the wall dusted, the Virgen de Guadalupe candle wiped off, the framed photos of grandparents from Jalisco straightened. A 6-year-old in San Antonio in 1987, named Hector, spent 3 hours every Saturday morning helping his mommy clean the sala before he was allowed to ask about the rest of the day. By the time he was 12, he could clean a living room faster than most grown men can clean their car. The sala had to be ready for visitors at any moment. Tias dropped by unannounced. The compadres from down the street stopped in for coffee. Today, asking a small child to do 3 hours of labor before any reward is considered emotionally manipulative. In the 1980s, it was just the way Mexican mothers ran a household. And those kids still walk into other people's homes today and notice if the coffee table needs dusting. Pause for 1 second. Number 7. Tú no eres como las gringas. You are not like the white girls. The white girls down the block could sleep over at friends' houses. The Mexican daughter could not. The white girls could go to the mall on Friday night with their boyfriend. The Mexican daughter could not. The white girls had a curfew of 11. The Mexican daughter had a curfew of 9, and her older brother had to drive her home. There was a girl in 1986 in El Paso named Yolanda, who asked her mommy if she could go to a school dance at 15, and her mommy answered with the same 6 words. Yolanda did not go to that dance. By the time she got to her senior year, she had not been to a single school dance. Today, this kind of gendered curfew enforcement is called controlling and culturally restrictive. In the 1980s, it was the wall that Mexican parents put around their daughters because they had seen what happened to girls who slipped through it. The rule was love, and the rule was fear, and the rule was both at the same time. Number 6. The older primos in charge. It was the summer of 1984, and a 13-year-old in Edinburgh, Texas, was suddenly responsible for 5 younger cousins from sunup to sundown, while all the parents went to work at the cannery. No adult in the house, no phone to call, just a 13-year-old, a fridge full of bologna and white bread, and 5 smaller kids who had to be fed, watched, and put down for a nap by 2 in the afternoon. This was normal. Every Mexican family had one cousin like this, and that cousin grew up in a hurry. The 13-year-old learned to cook eggs, change a diaper, settle a fist fight between 2 7-year-olds, and answer the door without opening it if a stranger knocked. By the time she was 16, she was running her household like a sergeant. Today, leaving a 13-year-old alone with 5 small kids would land her parents in front of a judge. In the 1980s, it was the only option for a working-class Mexican family, and it produced a generation of Mexican women who were ready for adulthood at an age when most people are still learning to tie their shoes. Number 5. Vicks Vapor Rub for everything. A cough? Vicks on the chest. A headache? Vicks on the temples. A stomachache? Vicks on the belly button. A sore throat? Vicks under the nose. A bad dream? Vicks on the forehead. The blue jar of Vicks Vapor Rub was the entire medicine cabinet in a Mexican household in the 1980s. Mommy had one in the kitchen drawer, one in the bathroom, and one on the nightstand. When a kid got sick, The doctor was not the first phone call. The blue jar was the first move. Donna Lupe in San Antonio swore by it. She raised 6 kids on Vicks and prayer, and only one of them ever ended up in an emergency room, and that was for a broken arm. Today, treating childhood illness with a menthol rub instead of medical care is considered medical neglect. In the 1980s, it was just thrift and tradition. The Vicks did not actually cure anything, but the act of mommy rubbing it on your chest while she said a quiet prayer over you was the part that worked. That was the medicine. The smell of Vicks, the warm hand, the prayer in Spanish you could not quite understand. Mexican kids today still smell that menthol and feel safe. Number 4. The egg cleansing, limpia. When a kid was acting strange, crying for no reason, sleeping badly, or just off, mommy did not take them to a therapist. She took them to abuela. Abuela would pass an unbroken egg over the kid's body in slow circles, from head to feet, while whispering prayers in Spanish. Then she would crack that egg into a glass of water and read the shape of the yolk like it was a map. Mal de ojo, susto, envidia from a neighbor. The diagnosis was confirmed, and the kid would feel calmer almost immediately. There was a 5-year-old in San Antonio in 1985 named Marisol, who could not stop crying for 2 days, and her abuela did a limpia on her at the kitchen table. And Marisol slept through the night for the first time in a week. Today, performing folk healing on a child instead of seeking medical evaluation is something a CPS worker would write down in a report. In the 1980s, it was the first line of defense, and Mexican grandmothers had been doing it for hundreds of years. The egg was not the healing. The hands of abuela were the healing. The prayers were the healing. The feeling of being seen by someone who knew exactly what to do. Modern medicine still has not figured out how to bottle that. Number 3. No vas al baile. The novio pulled up in front of the house in his lowrider, the engine humming low, the cumbia playing soft from the speakers, and the 16-year-old daughter inside was already dressed. Hair done. Makeup on. She had been getting ready for 2 hours. Then her papa walked into the kitchen, looked at her once and said the 4 words that ended the night before it started. No vas al baile. The novio in the lowrider waited in the street for 10 minutes, and then he drove away slowly. And the daughter watched him from behind the curtains and cried into a kitchen towel so her papa would not hear her. There was a girl in East Lay in 1987 named Sandra, who had this exact night happen to her, and the boy in the lowrider became her husband 8 years later anyway. They laugh about it now at family parties. Her papa still does not apologize. He says the same thing every time. I knew what I was doing. Today, this kind of last-minute parental veto over a teenage daughter's social life would be called controlling behavior. In the 1980s, it was a Mexican father's job description. The rule was about who held the keys to the daughter's life, and the answer was always Papa. Number 2, the Sunday Rosary at Abuela's. Every Sunday at 5 in the afternoon, the entire extended Mexican family gathered at Abuela's house for the Rosary. Not optional, not negotiable, not even if you had a school project due Monday morning. Abuela led the prayers in Spanish from her wooden chair in the corner of the sala, the rosary beads moving through her fingers, and the rest of the family knelt on the carpet around her. Tios in their work shirts, tias in their Sunday dresses, cousin fidgeting and getting hissed at by their mothers. The whole rosary took about 45 minutes. Abuela Lupe in Boyle Heights ran her Sunday rosary like clockwork from 1962 until the day she passed in 1994. 3 generations of her family knelt on that same carpet. Today, requiring children to attend a 45-minute religious ritual every week is something a modern co-parenting agreement would have to negotiate around. In the 1980s, it was just Sunday. The rosary was not really about the prayers. The prayers were the excuse. The real point was that every member of the family had to be in the same room every week, no exceptions. And that is how Mexican families stay the Mexican families across generations. Number 1. The public confession to the priest. The number one rule in the 1980s Mexican household was that mommy had a direct line to God, and the line ran through the parish priest. If a kid misbehaved badly during the week, mommy did not let him forget it. On Sunday, after Mass, she would walk that kid up to Father Ignacio at the front of the church, hold him by the shoulder, and say it out loud, in front of every other family lined up to greet the priest. Padre, mi hijo se portó mal en la escuela esta semana. Father, my son misbehaved at school this week. The whole vestibule of the church would go quiet. The other mothers would look down at their own children with a knowing glance. The priest would look down at the kid. The kid would look at the floor. The priest would say something in a low voice about respect and family and being a good Mexican boy. There was a boy in 1986 in San Antonio named Junior, whose mommy did this to him. 3 weeks in a row after he kept talking back at the dinner table. The first Sunday, Junior cried in the parking lot. The second Sunday, he was silent for the entire car ride home. By the third Sunday, he had stopped talking back entirely, and he never started again. Today, public religious shaming of a child is something most parenting professionals would call psychologically harmful. In the 1980s, it was the highest court in the barrio. The cops were not the threat. The teachers were not the threat. The principal was not the threat. The priest was the threat. Because the priest had the ear of God, and God was the only authority a Mexican mommy trusted higher than herself. That was the structure. That was how a generation of Mexican kids learned right from wrong. Not from a textbook, not from a therapist. From a wooden chair, a black robe, and a mother who loved her child enough to march him to the front of the church every Sunday until he got it right. These were the rules of a Mexican household in the 1980s. Some were beautiful, some were hard, and a few would not survive a single phone call to Child Protective Services today. Mexican parents in the 1980s were not perfect. They did what they knew, with the tools they had, in a country that was not always kind to them. They worked at canneries and construction sites and laundromats, and they raised children who turned into doctors and welders and teachers and grandfathers. None of this is parenting advice. It is just a look back at how things used to be. Today, parenting looks different. And in many ways, it looks better. And that is the point. Here is the challenge. Share which of these rules your familia had in the comments below. Tell us if your mommy was a chancla mother or a wooden spoon mother. I want to know if you ever walked 8 blocks to la tiendita with $1 at the age of 5. Because these are not just rules. They are proof that a generation of Mexican parents loved their kids the only way they knew how, with structure, with faith, and with both hands.